Hi, everybody. Oh, shoot. What just happened there? So Chris had to unfortunately take an emergency call just as we were about to go live. So Michael Chuchong and I are kind of running the show momentarily by ourselves. And we're not really by ourselves because we have two guests with us tonight. You will probably recognize them from in the last year or two. We've had Kim and Randy on the show many times, typically talking about what's going on down in the States, about flag waves or flag exchanges on the Niagara Falls bridges. We've done lots of meet at the borders with them and uniting Canada and US on many of the same topics that are facing both of our countries. And more recently, they have been working with the New York State audit teams and trying to prove, one, that election fraud did happen, and two, how it happened, and bringing the evidence forward and moving forward with lawsuits and civil lawsuits, and trying to basically get rid of the machines and correct the wrongs so that going into the future, we never repeat our mistakes and we actually move forward in a more legal way. So Randy and Kim have agreed to come on with us today, talk about their work that they're doing, talk about where it's at currently, talk about whether election fraud happened in this current election down in the States, and what exactly is the temperature now that Mr. Trump has made all these fancy announcements. Is it what the American people wanted? So welcome, Kim and Randy. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. It's always great seeing you guys and having our dear friends on the show. Randy's always got amazing stories to tell, or at least stories that make us laugh and make us feel not so not so out in the bush, shall we say. So congratulations, you guys. I know you guys were betting on Trump winning, and it looks like you have won. It's a big change from the Biden regime, that is for sure. What do you guys think of the recent announcements that Trump has made with regards to his executive orders after you guys fought so hard to get him in?
I'm blown away. He's just been nonstop.
Yeah.
And doing so many things that are making so many people happy, and made trips to, matter of fact, they wanted him to go to California, and he said, what about North Carolina? After the flood, they've been ignored. And he said, no, we're going there on the way. And so he's just been nonstop and doing things like taking us out of the WHO, and things that people never thought would happen, I think. And I was telling somebody not very long ago, my daughter graduated from college and she went from conservative to liberal, not like purple hair crazy liberal, but liberal, leaning left for sure. And she lives in Oregon, which everybody thinks is so liberal, and it's not as liberal as you think. And she lives in the sticks, and her boyfriend, he likes to talk about politics. She doesn't. And so I just kind of leave it alone, right? Well, her boyfriend, last time I was there visiting, I think it was in February, he comes home and he starts talking about Joe Rogan, talking about all the illegals coming in to our country. And I was like, yes, that's an answer to prayer, right? And so he talks about it quite a bit, and he pays attention. And I never was going to ask them who they voted for, but guess what? My daughter told me that they voted for Trump.
Wow.
That's a win in itself, and that happened a lot across the country. Kim and I have seen so many people waking up. We've been on a 3-year odyssey, you might say, of going around and speaking out on, whether it's on stage or podcast, radio, you name it, in person. We run into people where we are traveling, and everywhere we go, we're beginning to see people waking up, and the whole narrative that the mainstream media tries to put out there is that the country is divided 50-50. It's so close. Any election could be anybody's guess. And then, of course, they like to have it come out with the Democrats win 51-49, 51-49, 51-49, which
Right.
would lead into the election issues that we've been studying. But we can tell you firsthand, we've been all over the place. We've been to Europe 3 times. We've been in Canada some. We've been all over the United States, and places that are supposed to be all leaning left and all this story about 50-50 or even more towards the left. It's just not true. I mean, we've been in the belly of the beast in Manhattan, in Washington, D.C., you name it. And people tell us, well, you can't talk about conservative issues, or the hat I'm wearing. You can't wear that hat. I wear that hat wherever I go. I don't care. I wear it. It's the thing of it is I expected pushback, and I have had almost zero pushback. And I have had, you can ask him, 1,000 more than unbelievable thumbs up, comments, support. So this idea that it's 50-50 is nonsense. I said all along in my gut, I would think it was more like 80-20. And there was a news station that did a mainstream that did a poll not too long before the election, and they were talking numbers like 79-21 or whatever. I said, I think that's a lot closer to the reality.
Yeah.
We've been being run, and by we, I don't mean just the United States, but we've been being run by a small handful of radicals that are put in place by, well, basically fraudulent elections, pure and simple. The machines are a major issue. I wish every machine on this planet was gone, and we're working with that.
I'm with you there. We're getting or hearing rumors that Doug Ford here in the province of Ontario, we're not supposed to have a provincial election until 2026, but there's a whole lot of rumor swirling that he's probably going to call an election early this week or next week for February. And I know provincially, we also count our ballots through the machines, and federally it's all done paper and hand counting. But I'm sure it's not going to be long before they switch our federal elections to the machines as well, because as you said, it's super easy to use the machines and cheat. And the mail-in ballots are also another issue that need to be contended with.
Yes.
But, so was your family happy about Trump's win then?
Well, most of my family, I have one daughter she is another one who has been very liberal, and my granddaughter. And, sometimes I scratch my head a little and think, how can this be? But she's been in college for many years. She's actually working on her doctorate's degree. And so, there you have it. But even though she leans left, she still is not exactly a Trump fan. But we've talked a lot about the whole thing with the fraud and the election and all that. And at first, they didn't want to hear a word about it. I was, you know the drill. I was a conspiracy guy, tinfoil hat, the whole thing, which is hurtful coming from your daughter and your granddaughter. But you know what? They now understand and they now believe. I showed them evidence on top of evidence, and they admitted that, yes, the election was stolen, but we still don't like Trump.
So I think that's what a lot of people feel, honestly. Like my dad, he has some dementia now, so he changes his mind sometimes. But I had a Trump hat on. I went to their house and my parents' house, and he wanted my hat so bad that I'm like, but so I came home and ordered him one and sent it to him, and he loved it. But I've heard him say in the past there was things he didn't like about Trump. And Randy and I have talked about this too, how he cracks me up, like the stuff he says. But sometimes I'm like, no, just no, just stop. But
well, I compare it to
that this time he's way more presidential. He definitely has changed since he got shot, and he will tell you himself he knows. Matter of fact, he said it more than once that he feels like God saved him for a reason. And I definitely think he's more presidential now. He's not bashing people like he used to. And I mean, like I said, he cracks me up, but for the people who are so worried about the mean tweets, I think he's being way better about that. So that's a good thing.
And I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. But he was maybe didn't handle it well. I compare him to a doctor with a bad bedside manner. Sometimes you get a doctor that you don't really care for, and you think their mannerisms aren't quite what they should be as far as bedside manner, but they're a good doctor, and that's what we have with Trump. He's what the country needs. He's just exactly what we need to straighten things out, whether you like his bedside manner or not, so to speak. So that's that. But he does crack me up as well. Like, one of the things that I really loved was the whole issue with North Carolina having been ignored. And Kimberly and I have been involved with the relief effort down there. Been down there several times, taking supplies down there, doing whatever we could to support, and we're working on that now. We got a fund drive on to help feed some of the livestock that's struggling. But I kind of felt when Trump got in that he would jump in there and help, and he has. And it's a great thing that he's doing that. The only problem with it is everybody is starting to relax and say, well, Trump's got this. We don't need to worry about it anymore. And that's not the case. The damage down there was hundreds of billions of dollars. They lost 6,000 miles of road, thousands of bridges, thousands of homes, businesses, etc. So he just released $2 billion, which is a great start. But the way
he didn't just release $2 billion. He took $2 billion away from they were spending it on illegal aliens.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. It was earmarked for FEMA.
Right.
In FEMA for the illegals. And he took it, and he came right out and said it when he went to North Carolina. He said, I'm taking $2 billion that was earmarked in FEMA for the illegals, and I'm giving it to North Carolina. He said the illegals won't be needing it because they're going home. I love it.
You know what I love about Trump is, so I think it's kind of funny, Jody, because when you and I, we didn't know each other that well. And you remember the night we were all together in a group and some things happened that, we felt differently about. And of course I will blame it on the lemon drop martini that I had partly, but you were saying, like, you purposely interrupted me, which you told me that you did that. And then I was like, I pointed my finger in your face and said some not very nice things. And now look, we love each other, right? But I said all that because I'm very, like, I think Randy said to me the other day something about, you didn't say I was harsh, Randy, but you said, I forget what you said, but I was like, no, I just cut to the chase. And that, I love that about Trump. He sat there in the meeting with the people in California, and the mayor, and they were like, well, these people can go on their land. And he said, 8 groups of people told me that it's going to be 18 months. And she said, well, they can go, it'll be a week. And he said, a week is too long. And I just love that about him. He just cuts the crap, cuts right through it, and says how it is. And some people don't like that.
Well, I love it. I love it. Like, one of the things that he did was addressing the World Economic Forum the other day.
Yeah.
And he kind of spanked them while he was doing that speech. And he did the same thing when he was being inaugurated. He's got the previous regime, I guess I'll call it, all lined up standing behind him. And he spanked them pretty good. He don't mince words. So I love it.
So what did you think then about his announcement about the mRNA vaccines coming in through the Stargate AI company? Because that's where I went, whoa, dude, you've got RFK on your staff, and are you not aware of what's going on with these mRNAs? They're the ones that are causing all of the cancers. And here you are bringing out mRNA vaccinations for individual, or to be individualized per person for cancers, the very thing that's causing the cancers. What am I missing here? And I thought, here we go. Is this the end of the Trump, he's my hero, gonna save us era with these announcements?
You know what I feel like there's a severe lack of communication. And to this day, he's so proud of the fact that he got the COVID jab through the red tape and got it out way faster than vaccines normally get out. He's so proud of that. And I think maybe that blinds him a little bit to the fact that these people are dying and having cancers, and all the athletes that have died. And somehow there's an information gap. I think I don't think he has that clear picture, but maybe the fact that he's so proud of getting that through, maybe that clouds his vision a little bit. I don't know, but it seemed like, I still to this day think, even though people still love him, I think if he would come out and say, you know what, Dr. Birx admitted in her book that she lied to me, and they were all lying to me about the COVID jab, and I did get it through quickly, and I'm very proud of that. But now I understand that it's causing health issues, and then realize how that is going to relate to these cancer vaccines that they want to do. So, obviously getting information to him is so just like almost impossible, right? Even people like Mike Lindell don't have direct contact whenever they want to with him. So it's very, very hard, to get that information. And he probably still has some bad people around him that aren't telling him the truth, right?
Well, I think that is probably some of the problem. And as time goes on, I'm thinking that will get adjusted. I would hope. I believe it will.
Yeah.
I really don't believe that this is the end of him being the good guy era. I just think that there's something going on that we aren't seeing or understanding. And as time goes on, I think you'll see an adjustment. That's my opinion. But just another example of what Kimberly was just saying, we talked about a little earlier on the phone. I was talking to one of the guys that's in his inner circle in the campaign before the election, and they were pushing early voting, which Kimberly and I are dead set against after learning what we've learned. And we're telling this campaign guy, says, you know what, why are they pushing this early voting? It's a terrible thing to do. We discussed it. I don't think I even made a dent or, changed their mind at all, but it all worked out in the end. But he told me, his campaign advisor, which he's one of the very top ones, that there are still several people in his inner circle on his campaign committee that don't realize or believe that the election of 2020 was stolen. Now, that President Trump himself knows, understands, and has said it a million times and never said otherwise.
Right.
So you have to wonder, how is it that he would have in his inner circle running his campaign people who don't believe that the election had been stolen in 2020? It just blew my mind.
Yeah.
I think
I
think it's kind of the same thing, like the information not getting to him. But, did you guys hear what Laura Trump said at the inauguration? That 2024 was a free and fair election, and that people's confidence in our elections was restored. Mm-hmm. And you know what? That's his daughter-in-law. But Trump doesn't say that.
No.
He said again today, well, they still tried to cheat, but they just didn't. It was too big to rig. So even there's a gap,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, there definitely was cheating going on down ballot. Everybody's really well aware of down ballot cheating. They stole 3 seats in the House of Representatives in New York State, or so it appears. And on and on. In California, they were counting votes. How long, Kim, before they got done counting votes? They're not counting votes or making ballots, but whatever. We know what they're doing.
They lost how many seats in California? I think 3.
Yeah. And in New York.
And then when it just gets over the line for the Democrat, then they like, okay, we're done. We're done counting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But here's the thing. Another complication added to it is that, okay, so if you push the issue that they were cheating in the 2024 election, even though we know they were, you you stand the chance of people saying, well, then Trump probably didn't win,
Right.
which is really dumb in my opinion, because I think what they would find is that he won by a bigger margin than we even know. But
Well, there actually
people would
was
say that.
there
What's
was
that?
a very weak little attempt before the certification. A few of the opposition were saying, well, we should have a forensic audit. And I'm like, yes. That's all you're going to find out is he won bigger than you thought he did. So please, let's do this.
Mhm.
But it didn't happen. But,
So
you know,
So
we
what
didn't
did you
want
think
to.
about what did you think about his announcement then? Was it an executive order or an announcement saying he was going back to paper ballots for the election? He was going to change that as well?
I mean, he campaigned on that too. So, and
Right.
he can do that for federal elections.
But not for state?
It's not an executive order yet, but he has talked about doing that. And when he talks about doing it, he intends to do it. We've learned that about Mr. Trump. So if he's saying it, he means it. And
Right.
he does
The only
follow.
thing that scares me about the executive orders is that they're reversible.
Yeah.
So I hope this time he's smart enough to, get some laws changed,
Yeah.
or force people. This is what United Sovereign Americans that Randy and I have been in for quite some time, which was New York Citizens Audit. Now they're United Sovereign Americans, and I'm state director for Michigan for them. And that's what they are. That's what we're all about, is forcing these officials to follow the law that's already there.
Mhm.
Right.
Exactly.
There's plenty of election law that says, all the parameters, what we're supposed to do, the error rate, everything. And they're just not following it. So I hope that he this time doesn't only do executive orders, because look at Biden just reversed them all the minute he got in office.
True.
Exactly. First day. And it's funny because it's the same thing as here. We've got all these laws in the books and nobody is the election, Canada elections, provincial elections, they have become bullies in as far as voting day goes and whatnot, to the point where the voter, the ballot or writing boss has been putting blankets up and not letting the scrutineers watch the ballot counting process. And everybody, for some reason, they just put up with it. So many people were putting in videos where certain candidates weren't even on the ballots. And so, I mean, they've done that all the way across Canada now.
Yeah.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, we've been seeing a lot of the same things here in
Yeah.
2020. We saw that in Detroit there near Kimberly. They've covered up the windows with paper. They somehow managed to convince everybody to go outside, and then they went back inside and locked the Republican counters out and covered
Well,
the windows up so you
Yeah,
couldn't
I
see.
mean, when they would go out for a break or whatever, they wouldn't let them back in.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we've seen.
Put up with that. Like, they know it's not legal.
Well, yeah, and
They don't
here's
care.
another little.
They just don't care.
I know. I mean, we had a little example here in 2024 where in Philadelphia area, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, there was ballots coming in, mail-in ballots that were coming in past the allowable postmark past election day. You're not allowed to count them. It's illegal, clearly.
Right.
So somebody took it to a federal judge, and the federal judge says, no, you can't do that. You can't count those ballots. And the commissioners from Bucks County replied to the federal judge in the world in public, well, people violate election law all the time, so we're just going to count them.
Wow.
Excuse me. They went back to the judge, and I don't know exactly the conversation, but the judge shut it down. But That's the attitude. Is, well, we violate election law all the time. Who cares? Whatever. We're just going to do it anyway. And then sometimes they don't even know they're violating the law. Kimberly and I have both been in situations, I don't know how many times, where we're talking to election officials and they don't even know until we tell them, and their jaw drops. They're breaking the law and they don't even know it, because the state kind of runs things down to the county level, and the guys at the county level, they don't question anything. My directions come from the state. The state told me to do A, so I'm going to do A, and they don't question it. They don't know any better. So we're in the process of trying to educate people about that. That happens a lot.
That was a lot of the problem everywhere, all across the country here, because people didn't know their jobs. They didn't
Right.
know the legalities. They didn't know the parameters of their job. They didn't know that, like the one guy, I think it was in Arizona, he stands up and says, I'm certifying, but I'm certifying under duress because they told me if I don't, I'll be arrested and charged with a crime in the morning. So he certified the election.
Wow.
And he
It's
just
nonsense.
job. He didn't have to certify.
Yeah.
And that happened all over the place.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There was I don't know exactly all the things that went on here in Michigan, but there was some craziness that was going on with the GOP here. And they literally had a different convention and didn't invite some of the GOP members. And they've been fighting amongst themselves for months. And then they tried to throw out Christina Caramo, and I don't even know where it all ended up. But I did see the other day that one of I think the convention that they had where they didn't invite people in, a judge ruled that was illegal. So now by the 30th, they have to like redo that and invite everyone in or something. But it's been craziness for months. So it was clearly illegal what some of the people were doing, and they did it anyway. They don't care.
Well, another example of
Nobody press charges. Nobody.
No.
Sorry, Randy. Let me say one more thing.
yeah,
That's the next step of what United Sovereign Americans is doing. Is
Mhm.
they're going to start with one state. They're going to file lawsuits holding these people criminally liable
Mhm.
for election fraud.
Mhm.
See, one of
So-
the games that these election officials like to play is they refuse to look at your evidence or data. They're just turn a blind eye. We don't want to see it. We don't want to hear it. We've served them with papers all over the place and basically get ignored. I hope that changes when we have a new Department of Justice now. I hope that pendulum kind of starts to swing, but we've been largely ignored by all the law enforcement and the Biden Department of Justice, et cetera, et cetera. We've taken evidence to everybody. But
Right.
the reason they do that is because that's plausible deniability, that's called. Well, we didn't know it, but we didn't know we were breaking the law.
Mhm.
So we're very much working at making sure that they've been put on notice that, yes, you are breaking the law. And as Kimberly was just saying, we're now moving into a phase with the United Sovereign Americans that we're going to start to have lawsuits to hold some of these people accountable. And hopefully, if we make a few examples out of some of the higher ups, the message it'll be heard far and wide. But that when they lose plausible deniability because you can show the evidence that they knew and they chose to break the law anyway, then they have to defend themselves with their own money. And they don't get to use the state's money to defend themselves. That should be a little bit of a stumbling block for some of these people. So, we told you. You were warned, I don't know how many times. You chose to ignore us. So now there will be consequences.
Mhm.
So I wanted to tell you guys, United Sovereign Americans, a couple of months ago, they did, gosh, Randy, you couldn't remember earlier. Now I'm not going to be able to think of the name of it. Gosh darn it. The type of study.
Document.
What's that? No. Oh my gosh, I'll think of it in a second. But they did research. It was in 7 states. And I'm sorry, it was 21 states. Aggregate data for 21 states where what USA did
It
was
was 7 states. It was 7.
I'm looking at the website right now. So
Okay, go ahead.
So they have scorecards for the states that we are in. Okay. And so they had the same parameters for scorecards for the states that they were in. And they looked at all the data and they compared how they performed versus like the error rate, you know, how badly did they go over the error rate and stuff like that. So aggregate data for 21 states with completed scorecards, 29 million apparently ineligible voter registrations. That means they registered on January 1st, or they were 185 years old, or, you know, just whatever, something was wrong and it didn't look like it was legit.
How many thousands upon thousands of them they used the same tools to find people as what law enforcement would use or debt collectors would use, which is pretty reliable stuff. And they couldn't find these people at all. There's no social security number. There's no address. There's nothing. They're completely made up.
Wow.
29 million votes. Holy cow.
Well, yeah. And here, well, it was not votes, it was registrations.
Oh, okay. Okay.
29 million apparently ineligible registrations. And then 10 million of those cast votes.
Wow.
So, and they had like really, really strict parameters. Like these were, it was the same kind of study, which I cannot believe I can't remember the type of study that it is. But it's the same kind of study when they research vaccines and stuff like that. A prevalent study. There we go.
There you go.
So, like, if you were going to study a vaccine, you would administer it and then do the placebo, and you would see what's the prevalence of injury or, you know, disease or whatever. That's the same type of process they used for this. So 2 million more votes counted than voters who voted.
Yeah. Those are votes that come in with no signature, which is not possible for that vote to be counted if it shows up with no signature.
Right. No, that's an important thing here because people are thinking this is like an American issue, but it isn't.
Right.
After talking to you, the main crux of it is creating a voter bank. So false voters, and then they just sort of withdraw the amount of voters they need out of that voter bank to get the election outcome. And the one thing you said to me is it's not Democrats, it's been Republicans and Democrats, or, you know, liberals and conservative. They do it in every country. Both sides do it. They've been doing it for decades.
Yeah.
So that's important to know because in Canada, we have different methods of getting those voter banks, but that's how they're doing it here too. It's the same exact way.
Yes, and on that, go ahead.
And there's algorithms in the voter rolls, so they are able to hide those fake registrations that are hidden in there.
And the machines know how to pick them out.
The error rate by law that is not supposed to be, they're not supposed to go above the error rate 0.0008. Guess what the error rate was in those 21 states?
10%.
13%.
Holy cow.
13%.
Yeah, you're allowed 1 in 125,000 votes that can be an error, whether it's a clerical error or fraud or whatever. It doesn't matter. 1 in 125,000 is the limit of what's allowed.
So that's the 0.00.
Yes, that is that same. Those numbers are one and the same.
Mhm.
Wow.
So when in the 2020 election, for instance, in New York State, we would have been allowed with those numbers in New York State to have had, I think, 73 or 78. I can't remember. One of the other votes in error according to that parameter.
Right.
There was over 750,000 votes in error, which is slightly more than 70.
Wait, what did you do? Can you repeat that, Randy?
In New York State in 2020, you would have been allowed 73 or 78, something like that, votes in error according to that parameter of 1 in 125.
Oh, yeah.
And yet we had 750,000 something in error, and we had 338,000 more votes than voters, meaning 330,000 votes, 338 that came in with no signature. Well,
I have to interrupt you because number one, I was talking about 2024 data.
yes.
So I want to make sure that we're clear about that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people now will say, well, 2020, poo-poo, it's over, right? So the study that I was talking about is 2024.
Yeah.
And I just want to clarify, because Randy, you said it was the 21.6% vote of voters unverifiable. It wasn't all because they didn't have signatures. And it's broken down on the website. If you want to look at this, it's unite4freedom.com. So it's 5.6% voters do not exist. 12.3, the address is invalid, and 3.7 vote to voter discrepancy. So, like
So
I said,
how can they even certify an election when you've got those crazy numbers, and even just the number of voters that voted outnumber the population? Like, there's no way that election should have been certified.
Right.
And if anything, have a brand new election day, and you got one day to fix that, and everybody's got to come in and vote that wants to vote. Like that to me seems absolutely astronomically wrong.
It's ludicrous. And again, to go back to 2020, which I don't want to dwell on that a lot, but in 2020, there are 62 counties in New York State, and the state has no legal right or ability to add votes or registrations or any of that. They're just a reporting mechanism. They tabulate the votes that come in county by county. They report it. They're not supposed to change anything, but they've been caught many times. So as an example, when the counties report their numbers to the state adds them up and says, well, Cattaraugus County had 1,000 and Chautauqua County had 1,000. That's 2,000 votes, so to speak, to throw out a simple number.
Right.
Well, that's not what happened. They report their number, and when the state adds them all up and report them, the numbers are all completely different. They've been adjusted to accomplish their goal, and so the numbers don't jive. If there's one county that's not in sync with the state report, they're supposed to halt the certification process until they go back to that county where there's a discrepancy, find the discrepancy, fix the discrepancy until the numbers do reconcile, and then go forward with the certification. In the election of 2020, I don't know what it is in 2024 yet, but we will sooner or later.
Right.
2020, not one single county reconciled. All 62 counties were out of sync with the state report, and they certified it. So they just basically completely violate the law, blatantly in your face. We're doing it. What are you going to do about it? And
on top of that, the secretaries of state in so many states, including Michigan, where I'm at, they said certification is only like a ceremonial type thing.
Yeah.
It's not. But
No.
that's what they're pushing now. So I have to correct myself now, because I said the study was 2024. It was 2022. Sorry.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten all the data for 2024 yet.
Right.
But we will have
Actually, I'll correct myself a little bit too. We try to keep our numbers straight, but there's a lot of numbers. But when we were going back and forth a little bit about the report, she was looking at one report and I was looking at another. She had to report for all 21 states. I had to report for 7. So that's why we're not quite on the same page. But when I realized what she was doing, I said, oh, okay. So my apologies for that.
No worry, that's a lot of fraud numbers. And I know from my accounting background, if the right side doesn't equal the left side,
exactly.
start all over. You need to find those pennies or those dimes, or in your case, those $100 bills.
Well, welcome to the new math. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah. But
It all works out. You just don't understand.
Yeah, that's right. Typical math is ceremonial anyway.
It's called fuzzy math.
Well,
2 always
that's right.
equals 5 now. That's right. I forgot.
yeah. As an example, Kimberly and I were touring with Professor Clements. A lot of you may know who he is. I don't know, but he's one of the foremost experts on the election shenanigans and an attorney. And we've become very close with him, working with him on an effort to get rid of the machines, et cetera. So we did a little tour with him. And then before he went home, he went to the Cattaraugus County Board of Elections with Kimberly and I, which is my home county. And we went there and we start debating all this. And I love Professor Clements. He's an encyclopedia, but he can also look it up on his laptop and back up what he says. And he did that. He kind of backed him up a little bit a couple times, because I'm not sure whether they didn't know better or they're just trying to get away with giving us a line, but whichever the case may be, he called him on it and he's right. So I think a lot of it, they don't know. They didn't know.
Well, it was pretty funny that day in that meeting because they said, no, we don't have to. It's illegal to give you guys the cast vote records. And he just goes like this.
Turns his laptop around, and there's the law, the code, the whole thing. And they did, we told them we wanted the cast vote record because that will show us patterns and things in the machines that are going to make it very obvious that there's fraud. And so they don't want us to see that. So New York passed a law that the counties nobody's allowed to give us the cast vote record, which is completely contrary to federal law. The federal law says that the cast vote record shall be available for public consumption at all times. And the other thing is that they said, well, New York passed a law. Well, I don't care what New York passed because federal law supersedes state law in any federal election, which is the election we were discussing. So they said, well, you can go ahead and file it, but we're going to deny it. They know that's a violation of the law. But we're like, okay, let's get the process started. So Kimberly filled it out. We filed it. And sure enough, they denied it. We appealed it. They denied it again. So I asked Professor Clements, well, what's the next step? He says, take them to court. So we went and filed a lawsuit in federal court in Buffalo against my county board of elections and some of the officials that signed the denial. And they're pretty shook up about that, it seems. But anyway, we're asking for a declaratory judgment from a federal judge because the law clearly states that the cast vote record is to be given to the public at all times. And
So
federal law supersedes state law. So what's the question?
So get what happened in my county. I go to the monthly meeting for the election. I forget what they're called here, canvassers. Anyways, or the election board. So I go there with another guy from USA, and he's the data guy. So he has all the numbers, right? And I said, you know what? We're just here to start a conversation because I had talked to the head of elections over the phone, and I had requested the 2022 cast vote records, and it got denied. And I sent it in again, and it got denied. So I called him and I said, what's the problem? Because I got these in 2020. Like, am I wording it wrong or what? What? And he said, no, we don't have them. And I said, excuse me? We don't have them. Nobody ever asked for them, so we never created them, which is an untrue statement anyway. It's not something you have to create. It's it's what the voting happened, what happened inside the machine, right? So I told him, well, it's federal law that you have to maintain those records for 22
months.
22 or 23, yeah.
22 months.
And so I go to the meeting and I take this other guy with me. They were so happy. They're like, nobody ever comes to these meetings. We're so happy to have you here. And then when I told them why I was there, and then Tim, the guy who was with me, he spoke a little bit, and they just clammed right up.
They didn't seem quite as happy.
They're like, thank you for coming. And then they went on about their business, and they did not want to speak with us anymore.
Well,
they're just so used to nobody paying attention.
Exactly. That day that Kimberly and I had the meeting with Professor Clements and all at the Board of Elections, we questioned them because we said, well, how is it that the numbers for the county report don't jive with the state report and it's certified? And I really think that the lady, half of that team, I don't think she knew. I really don't think she knew any better. So she just as innocently as could be states so proudly, well, we looked into that because we brought that to their attention like 2 years ago. And they said, so we looked into that. I said, well, that's nice. What did you discover? Well, we don't count some of the votes until after the certification. I said, excuse me, I don't believe I heard that quite right. Did you say that? Oh, we don't count all the votes until after the certification. There's mail-in votes and there's absentee ballots, and we don't necessarily get all those counted. First of all, there's a deadline to have all votes counted. This year it was at 5 o'clock on November 20th. All
Right.
votes are supposed to be tallied. All votes. I don't care how it came in. All votes is all votes.
Right.
So don't talk to me after you certify the election on January 6th or in state elections even later that you still haven't tallied the votes and that you certify it and then we finish counting the votes. They said you can't do that and you can't certify an election if the numbers aren't jiving. It doesn't matter what your reason is. It doesn't matter. If that county report does not synchronize with the state report, you are not allowed to legally certify that election. She didn't know that. I really think she didn't know that.
Wow.
So how are these people getting hired to work in these offices if they really don't know the rules? You think that they would, one, have the rules posted for everybody so it's very, very clear. So if there's any discrepancies, you can go, oh, there it is. And you'd think that some kind of training would
Oh,
have.
there's training.
They
There's
don't know
training,
that.
all right. There's training on don't ask questions, don't make waves. This is how we do this. Just do it.
Wow.
Yeah,
There.
it sounds like they hired
It's
us
over.
for that reason.
I think sometimes it's like they don't know what they don't know, right? But then
But then they
It's
shouldn't
like-
be in that position.
why don't you know? Yeah, exactly. Like,
Well,
why don't you know? You should know the legalities of your job if you're in a position like that. But you know what? In some places, these people are volunteer. And I don't know if they are. I don't think they're in my county, and they're not in Randy's county. But I talked to a woman in Berry County where the famous Sheriff Darleaf is at, and he's done a lot for election integrity or election validity. But she was in a very small county, and wait, maybe she wasn't volunteer. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But anyways,
I think so.
they just don't. I don't know. They don't. They're not told their job, and they don't think to go, out of the don't color outside the lines, right? Don't go research the legality of your job. Don't go outside the lines as far as questioning anything.
Well, I can give you an example of that. My wife works for the Board of Elections. On election day, she's a poll inspector and runs the machines, runs the precinct. And they do go to school every year. They have to go to school for a few hours.
Right.
And there's a couple of questions came up, and she's like, well, they were saying things that she knew better. She'd been doing it for 35 years. And she's like, no, that's not right. And she's questioning it. And they got through it, but daggers, just you're not supposed to ask questions. This is what we want done. Doesn't matter whether it's legal or not. So there's that environment. And I think it's way worse from the state coming on down to the county. And these people are mostly appointed in New York. I can't speak for all the other states, but the Board of Elections commissioners, deputy commissioners, a lot of the other people throughout the Board of Elections are appointed. And if you check to see who's appointed and who knows who, it's very, there's a word for it I can't think of, but it's family, it's brother-in-law, it's my best buddy, it's my cousin.
Pretty greasy.
Nepotism. It's big. And another thing that one of my friends just discovered, and I'm not going to say a lot about this because I don't have the actual data to back it up, so I'll be a little tender on this subject. We're just getting onto it. But she was looking into donations, political donations to certain parties, which is a public record thing. And all of a sudden, we start to see a pattern where the people who were appointed to the BOE positions were some of the top donors to certain candidacies.
Mm.
And
So
there
they
was
have
some
money
paperwork
riding on
for
which
that.
candidate wins.
That happens all the time, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's pretty common, right?
Yeah.
So I know we've talked about, that this is worldwide, right? I think there's a lot of hope in the stuff that's happened since Trump has come into office, all the things that he's done so far, and the fact that so many people are waking up and so many things have changed, and even in other countries. I just saw today, was it Colombia?
Yeah, it was.
Was it Colombia where the guy was convicted of insurrection?
Oh no, you're talking about. I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I forget what country it was, but the guy he called for martial law, and he just got convicted of insurrection.
Interesting.
So there's a lot of stuff like that is happening, and so these people are, a lot of them are running for the hills. They're like backing down, and they know that they're beat right now. They know that they're not going to get away with their crap anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, or at least here, I think we're going to have a long run when people see what Trump does with our economy, with our health care, and with everything. I don't think we're going back to where, and especially if he is able to fix, or at least partially fix, our election systems, which he says he's going to do, and I believe him, then I don't think we're going back to the other side for a long time, if ever.
Well, I hope that's right. And, one of the great things that he did was backing out of the WHO. I love that. Kimberly and I were at the convention in Geneva when they held it out there. And, there was a big protest going on, what they're trying to do there. But then on the other hand, just last week, New York has been having a battle, which we've been supporting a friend of ours, Bobby Ann Cox, who's a constitutional attorney from Manhattan.
Yes.
She's been battling this COVID camp law, they call it, which is basically concentration camp. If they think you're sick, they can pick you up. And it literally says that the governor can order you to be detained in a place of the governor's choosing for a length of time of the governor's will. Well, that's a pretty open-ended statement.
Right.
I mean, for instance, any emergency, they have to declare an emergency, a health emergency, in order to put that regulation into place. But what's a health emergency? They're now talking about gun violence becoming a health emergency. It's not healthy to get shot. So that's a health emergency. And so the next thing where this could go, I'm not saying it's going there, but where it could go, if you kind of let your imagination go, if things get bad enough, is like, well, you own guns, you're an emergency, you're a danger to the system, we're going to have to pick you up.
Right. For your own mental health issues. Yeah.
And that gets around your Second Amendment there, right?
Forget the Second Amendment. You can either give us the guns or we'll just take you instead of the guns.
Well, people are they give it up so easily sometimes.
Yes.
I've seen pictures. I've seen in other countries these people in these COVID camps, and they're just all chill. It's like life is easy. Like, what is wrong with you? Like,
I'm not going to camp.
I'm with you, Randy. I'm not going to camp.
No, me neither. Like, come on, people.
Don't get in the van. Don't get on the bus. Don't get in the cattle car. Don't register. Don't go to the ghetto.
There's a quote that somebody said about not deserving freedom. Do you guys know that? About
those who are up for liberty for safety deserve neither.
Yes.
Yeah.
And another thing to do, which is a little off the track, but sort of similar, is they say the only thing that it takes for evil to take hold is for good men to do nothing.
Right.
Exactly.
Along that line as well.
Did you guys see what Michael just wrote? He said South Korea's impeached President Yoon Suk Yeol has been charged with insurrection after he attempted to declare martial law in December.
Wow.
Oh, okay. He sounds like he's from Alabama. You suck, y'all.
Yeah, I'll suck up. Well, I'll tell you, my favorite quote of all time, is yours, Randy. When the police came to the hospital and wanted to know why you would not put on a mask, and you said, "'Cause I'm American." Now you either charge me, give me my ticket, or you just let me walk back into that hospital. I got a sick friend in there that I need to tend to. I
Well,
was
that was
like,
a bluff. I'm like, when the police came, I said, I respect law enforcement. My son's a cop. I'm not going to wrestle with you, but I'm calling their bluff. If
Yeah.
they want me to, I'm not wearing a mask. And if they want me to leave, then they've got to press charges. If they press charges, I'll leave. If they don't press charges, I'm going back in and sit with my friends.
that's
You know,
good.
the funniest thing about that day I thought was, how many of us were sitting there and we were all in a row, and they went to each one of us and they said something. And then I put it on, my mask on at first, and I took it off. And then, so I think they gave me a little crap, and then they moved on and they went right past Bethan. And you know why?
She had her
She had
mask
her
on,
mask on her chin.
but it was
On her
on.
chin.
Well, she had it on first, like this, and then when she saw that
No, she
I
had
wasn't
it like
wearing one,
that.
and Randy wasn't wearing one, and AJ wasn't wearing, she was like, "Oh!" So then she brought it down to her chin.
And then what was it? Was it AJ the one that had his mask on the entire time? And they because of us, and they wouldn't let him come back in the
Luke.
That was Luke.
Luke.
That was
Yeah.
Veterans for Freedom, Luke. Yeah.
Sorry, I knew it wasn't AJ. But just there's no common sense. There's no, and you know what? I did stuff like that too. I went in a hospital during COVID, and I had these masks that were like a surgical mask, but they were cloth. So they were actually thicker than a paper surgical mask, right? So I walk in, and she hands me with tongs an N95 mask, and she goes, "I'm going to need you to put this on." And I said, "I have a mask on." And she had a little paper surgical mask on. And I said, "My mask is thicker than yours." What are you talking about? I'm going to need you to put it on. She just kept shoving it at me, right?
Yeah.
So I took it from her, and it was one of those cone-shaped, form ones. And it was like this on me. Like it was up to my eyeballs. And so I put it on, and I'm trying to I'm going into the elevator and up to the doctor's office, and I'm trying to get my wallet and stuff out of my purse, and I can't see anything because the mask is up to my eyeballs. So by the time I got up there, I was so annoyed. And then I'm standing in front of the people giving them my information and stuff, and I'm so flipping mad by this time. And they put me in the room, and I took the mask off, and I snapped the elastic on it, and I took my mask out and put it on, and nobody ever said a word.
I was in Hagerstown, and I had to come home take care of a little bit of business. I ended up going back, but that's another, you guys inspired us. Thank you with the Ottawa thing. And we got into Hagerstown and never looked back. And here we are today. But I came home from Hagerstown to take care of business a little bit, and I had a doctor's appointment, which I don't do much with doctors, but I have to go now and then. I have to get my physical for my semi-driver's license and whatever. So I had to go to the doctor. I go in the office, and one of the girls is sitting right there at the door. Here, you got to wear a mask. And I'm like, "No, thank you. I'm not wearing a mask." And one of the other girls knows me, knew I was in Hagerstown. She's from my hometown, so she knew me. And she went over, and she kind of gently told the other girl, "He's not going to wear a mask." So they just kind of let it go, and I went and sat down, and I'm getting daggers and evil eyes from other people, how dare you type thing, whatever. So it comes my turn to go into the office, and somebody had to have said something to the doctor, and I'm not wearing a mask. So I get in there, and the doctor says, "I understand you won't wear a mask." And I said, "You understand correctly, sir." Said, "Well, this is my office, my rules, and you will wear a mask." And I said, "No, sir, you've got that wrong. This is my face and my rules, and I'm not wearing a mask. Do I need another doctor?" Never heard another word about it. I went to that office after that, and everybody's wearing masks, and nobody ever said a word to me again about a mask.
Right. And we need more of your kahunas.
Yeah, just stand up.
I have a hard time with that because I see sort of both sides of that kind of thing, even though like I went in grocery stores without masks on and stuff, or I'd walk in with it on and then just take it off and and go through the store without it. So it's a little bit like I see both sides of it. Like if I own a place, do I have a right to tell you, like, if you're gonna come in my business that you have to wear a mask? But you also have the right to say, screw you, I'm not wearing a mask, or not come in my business, right?
Well,
I look
my
at it
way
like
of
this.
observing.
Yeah, I look at it like this. If more people had stood up and said no,
Oh yeah, for sure.
nobody would have had to. And
Oh,
it's the same
yeah.
with the elections. If more
Yeah.
people stood up and held their ground and said, no, you cannot certify this election,
Right.
it would never have been certified. But so many people are
Right.
willing to back down because of daggers or dirty looks or people whispering or because they're afraid to say no and somebody's going to get mad at them. So they let injustices be continued. And then you end up with these elections that we really don't know who really won.
Exactly. You don't know who won is the bottom line. You could
What
use
was the
it
will
or
of the
whatever, but
people?
you can't prove who won.
Right.
Exactly.
It's
And
funny
on
too, because you don't, I think that has a lot to do with how we were raised too, right? Like during COVID, I was teaching at the college, and then I was also working for a builder, or starting to work for a builder, right? So in the college, I ended up like, they squeezed me out during COVID. They stopped giving me classes to teach because they knew, like, they know who I am, right? They know, like, I'm a little bit of a more, like, I'm going to ask questions and I'm going to push the issue. And so they squeezed me out. And so I'm working for the builder. And from day one, he's like, this is a bunch of crap. And I worked for him the whole time. Almost nobody wore masks. One or two people did. And so, okay, fine, wear your mask, right? And then one of the carpenters took like a month off or something, because his wife got sick or some stupid crap. But the difference between people is really amazing to see. And the difference between my two employers at that time, like if I was at the college, I probably would have gotten fired if I didn't wear a mask. So it was almost a blessing that I got squeezed out. But then I'm working for this builder who was like, it's a bunch of crap. Like, I'm not wearing a mask. So I worked the whole time and I never wore a mask. So,
Yeah, I was watching a speech by a gentleman. I can't remember his name, but Hillsdale College, I guess, just had a big seminar. Catherine Austin Fitts was there and another gentleman was there. And he followed after her speech. And he was talking about, is Christendom done? And that a lot of our problems in our country is because Christianity is no longer the meat and potatoes of how our society runs. And all of our laws and our constitutions were based on Christianity and the supremacy of God. And we've gotten away from that. And because we've gotten away from that, people no longer live by the laws, but also live by the heart, by love. God's rule is love. If it's coming from a place of love, then it must be true. And we're not in that place anymore. And I thought, you know what? He's right, because if you're coming from a place of love, then love is truth and truth is honesty. And a lot of what's going on in the world right now is very dishonest. The way that people are treating each other, the way the elections are run, the way that our judicial systems are being held. And it takes people like yourself, Kim, and Randy to stand up and say, enough is enough. Let's get back to being truthful. And at the end of the day, we don't care who wins the election as long as it's truthful,
Right.
as long as those numbers are honest.
exactly.
And you guys have worked so hard the last 4 years on proving, one, what was fake in the election, what was done wrong in the election, how these machines play a giant role in the tabulation of numbers, how the early voting is completely corrupt and these mail-in votes are completely corrupt, and how many people clearly don't care about integrity anymore in order to allow this to happen. And even for them to say to you, well, we certify the election and then we continue counting. Well, where's your integrity in that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So
crazy.
I give you even more credit than us, you guys, Chris and Jody, because we live in America and you guys are so much further down the road than we are with this woke crap. And so your guys' fight has been harder than ours, in my opinion, and you've fought really hard. And I know some of the stuff, I probably don't know as much about what Chris has gone through, but I know what you've been through, Jody. I know when you were with the truckers, I know some of the stuff you went through and how you've never let your voice be silenced, not once, to the point where I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I've seen you get emotional having to go back to that oppression
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
when you were here in America. So I
Yeah.
give you a ton of credit for that. And people, like, I agree with what you said about the Bible, but at the same time, I think we also need to remember, yes, our country was founded on the Bible and our laws are written that way, which, a lot of people don't want to believe that, but it is true. If you read our founding documents, they were all Christians and they were willing to die for that and for our country. But at the same time, if you read in the Bible, so many people in the Bible, like, God was like, I don't want you to have a king. I want you to just, be direct with me, like directly have me, love and rule over you with love. And they were like, no, we want kings.
Yeah.
And so he gave them kings, and every time it failed. And then they built altars because God went away for a minute, and Moses went up on the hill and they built altars. And so, mankind has kind of been a mess from day one, and God has rescued us a lot, right?
Yeah, one thing I keep saying now, quite a bit now, is that people don't actually want freedom. They just want to be subjugated by those they agree with, right? And we're seeing that in Canada because, freedom, it takes a lot of responsibility because you've advocated that responsibility to other people to do things for you.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're responsible. And a lot of people don't want that. But in Canada, we've fought for, decidedly 5 years now to bring freedom to Canada. And the second Trump comes in, everybody's like, yeah, I'll take this deal. We'll be the 51st state. I mean, that's globalism, people. This is the North American Union. We just fought against that for 5 years together, right, shoulder to shoulder. And now you're ready to sell out because something easy, a good deal came along, and it's like, like I said, they don't want to be free. They just want to be ruled by people they like.
Well, it takes work to be free. I have a hat that says freedom isn't free. There's a cost to freedom. You have to work, you have to sacrifice in order to maintain your freedom.
Yes.
Well, that's partly why we've ended up where we're at, right? Because the church laid down and the people laid down.
Yes.
And
I'm glad you guys aren't laying down. I'm glad you guys aren't laying down.
Make the point that all of the craziness that we've talked about, and Kimberly, in my opinion, and a lot of other people too, all of the stuff that they've been able to impose on us was done because people were false representatives, not representing the will of the people, being put in place by a globalist plan to put globalist, socialist, Marxist-minded people in office. And that's happening across the world. Right. And you guys are getting ready to have an election, and you guys have got your problems with the freedom and the crazy stuff that's coming in. We've got our problems too, and we still do. I mean, even though Trump is in there, we're seeing, just like the COVID camp ruling came out right after Trump was inaugurated, and they ruled against us. So the globalist mindset, the tyranny is not gone just because Trump won the election. That's a great victory, but we still have a war to fight.
So this year at Davos, though, the mood was really down and some people didn't show up. And I don't know if you guys heard Trump speak at Davos.
Yes.
We did.
And I don't know if you heard, did you watch Klaus Schwab, his body language and how like downtrodden he was, and he had to introduce Trump. And so they know what's up. They know that people aren't buying their crap. I mean, some people are obviously still, right, buying their crap.
Yeah.
And actually somebody has proposed that we don't involve ourselves in Davos anymore. So they said they were excited to have Trump there in person next year. And now a congressman has proposed that we don't even participate anymore. So we'll see what happens with that. But
Well, I'll tell you, if he pulls out of NATO, I'll be impressed. But until then,
I want, yep, he needs to pull out of NATO. I mean, I don't understand. I don't know everything about NATO and or the UN, but I don't think we should be in any of it. I mean,
Well, the problem with NATO is, well, there's a lot of problems with NATO, but they're kind of backbiting us for one thing. And another thing is the United States is paying for almost everything, which is completely unfair. When it first was put together, it was probably a good thing. You know, it's just after World War II. And, you know, the Allies needed to unite and they were worried about Russia, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's why that happened. And that was a good thing. But now it's kind of twisted around to where the globalism is kind of creeping in there. And, you know, we're not being treated fairly in NATO. And just like Trump said about the Paris Accords and the WHO and the World Economic Forum, we're not being treated fairly and all that. Why should we be involved with people that are trying to take us down? So it's
Correct.
right.
And when they're all run by unelected corporations, foreign entities, why are we taking our lead from corporations? Because clearly corporations don't care about the people. They only care about their bottom line. And that's not the human resources. That's for sure.
why are we listening to Bill Gates about health information? I mean, come on.
Computer guy.
I don't have a clue. So,
Right.
But all of this craziness gets thrust upon us because of this election scam. And so the election scam is the electronic equipment is the tool that they use to do their dirty work. There's a lot of layers to it. There's a lot of stuff that's going on there. It starts with the inflated registration rolls, which we talked about. And as an example, there's 1.4 million duplicated registrations in New York State now. Kimberly and I canvassed a lot of those and went and knocked on the door. The voters don't know, but they'll take a legitimate voter and they'll take, if that voter has 2 pieces of property, for instance, or maybe a second address where they used to live, whatever, and they'll attach a brand new registration number, which is completely illegal. It's felony identity theft perpetrated by the State Board of Elections to assign another registration number to that person. And it's all done in the machines are involved with that to where they can find these encrypted voters and get them put in there when they need to, which is how you come up with 330,000 votes with no signatures. And just as an example, we talked earlier about it doesn't matter Democrat or Republican or whatever, the machines don't care. They're generating these false registrations. And we went to Albany. We're going to be going to Albany again on February 25th, and we're going to 20 state capitals is the goal. So we went there before we became United Sovereign Americans and expanded into all the states, and it was just New York Citizens Audit. And they broke us up into teams, and the goal was to visit all of the members of the New York State Legislature. And just before we went 2 or 3 days, I thought about a little experience I had with a Cattaraugus County legislator, whose name I won't mention, a friend of mine, had multiple registrations. I have all those records for the county, all the multiples. And I said something and she didn't believe me. It's kind of hurt my feelings because she's a patriot. She's a friend of mine, but she thought didn't believe me. So long story short, I finally got her convinced. I got her convinced when I found her name in the town records. And I said, hey, you know whose name I found on the duplicate vote? You got 3 registrations. And then she started to take me seriously. So the same sort of thing happened in Albany, and it doesn't matter Republican or Democrat or whatever. Before we went out there, I talked to our main data guy, and I said, you know what, because of what happened in Cat County, why don't you look at all the voting records and registration records of all the members of the New York State Legislature and see if we come up with any duplicates. We did. I don't remember the exact number. I think it was around 17, but it's been a long time. It had duplicate registrations, and 3 of them had multiple votes. That's all felonies.
Wow.
But they didn't do it. They didn't know. So they had no idea. So when we go there and we sit down in their offices to tell them these things, they're looking at us like we have a bunch of insane people in the Capitol, but get these people out of here. They really didn't know.
Right.
And so we have the data to prove it. And what gets me is we did prove it where you could tell they were turning and beginning to realize that we were legit, and yet they still do nothing. But the last one that I visited, I'll never forget. He was the Republican lead for the New York State Assembly. He had 2 Democrat registrations. He had 2 Republican registrations, and they were all voting. He had 13 double votes.
Wow.
He didn't know. Yeah, I told him, and he's sitting there telling me, well, there's nothing wrong with the system. What are you talking about? I don't know if he truly believed it or don't want to talk about it or whatever, but so he's telling me there's nothing wrong. I don't know what you're talking about. I said, well, look, here's your voting record and your registration record. This is right from the New York State Board of Elections. This is it. There is no other. We didn't write a novel. This is the record. You can look it up yourself. This is it.
Right.
And here you sit with 4 registrations and 13 double votes, and you're telling me there's nothing wrong with the system, and you're telling me that you didn't break the law. And I said, I believe you, sir. I don't believe for 1 second that you went out and got 4 registrations and voted double 13 times. I don't believe that for 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
But don't sit there and tell me there's nothing wrong with the system.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So just for our viewers at home here, how did you get your hands on the voter roll so that you knew who was double registered, who was registered to what parties, et cetera?
Well, I'll speak to that first, and then I'll turn it over to Kimberly because she's much more tech oriented than me. I'm a lumberjack. I'm good at the computer. But it started out by you can FOIA request voter registration and voter records. It's public record. You can FOIA request it, and you can get those records, which they did. And then our data guys, which we have very good data.
Oh, yeah, that was New York Citizens.
Yes, New York Citizens Audit. We have that's where it started. And we had very, very good data people. He has a PhD. He's very educated. The guy's sharp. And he filtered, which I don't really understand. Maybe I should let Kim take over at this point. He filtered the records in some way that he could somehow find those, and he found the algorithms in the system. And from here, it's all yours, Kimberly.
Okay, he didn't filter them. Okay, what he did was it depends on which Chris. I think probably both you guys would understand this. It's just a matter of how they query the system. So if you go into a list and you type. Like I keep trying to tell Randy lately, the computer's only as smart as the input that you give it, right? So if you go and look for star 15 Terry, if you search for that, you might find that record that's hidden. But if you only search for Terry, that record might not come up. And that's just a random example. I'm not saying that's, how they queried or anything. But depending on how you query the system, certain records will come up. However, when the data guy found these algorithms in the voter rolls, believe it or not, his house was hit by lightning 2 separate times. His computer was hit by lightning, and that's when he found.
That is a true story. Absolute true story.
Huh.
So
okay.
you reminded me of something I was going to say about my township earlier, Randy. I forgot. So when I was talking to the guy who's head of our elections, I said, when I was asking him, why don't you have the cast vote records? And he was explaining. And I said, well, why did you delete them? And he said, well, because we got new printers. So my county and one other county north of here, quite a ways north of here, got new printers. And he said we had to delete everything so the printers would work.
Yep. And then Dominion was going around with their trusted bill.
Hold on, I'm not done. So think about that. When you get a new printer at home, do you have to delete everything?
No.
Or what do you do when you get a new phone or a new laptop?
Nothing. You just connect it and it goes.
Yeah, and you transfer your data, right? Like your contacts and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't wipe out everything so the new thing. So these people, it's like, why don't you, when somebody from whatever Dominion or ESNS or whatever company it is, when they come in and tell you, yep, we got to wipe out all your old records because you get new printers, wouldn't you think, like, what?
Hold up. I need to make a backup. Thank you very much.
No.
Yeah.
But
And
the
that's
thing
what
is,
Peters is in prison for. Because
They
that's
so-
what she did.
they so proudly announced that what happened there, and so they're so naive, and it shows that they truly didn't think that through or understand it, because
Yeah, that guy
you
was
just
like super
proudly announced it.
excited.
You just broke the law, and you're very, very proud of yourself because
Wow.
announcing, I just broke it. They don't even know. They're clueless.
Right. Okay, so Dominion machines, tabulators, anything to do that's not paper. Machines is one way they can cheat. Messing with the election day, mail-in ballots. Are there other ways like
Fake
And
voters.
I'm just before you do that, you're talking about these false voters, and in Canada, that's how they're doing it here, but they're doing it through the immigrants.
Yes.
So when the immigrants come into Canada, they're created usually a health number first, and then they get passed on through the system, and
Through the medical system.
and they either do it intentionally or by accident, but they give their name again and somebody misspells it, and they give their name again and somebody misspells it. There are several identities for each immigrant. And then they wait 2 years and they can get naturalized. And in 2020, Canada made a rule that they don't ever have to come into the office to get naturalized anymore. They can just do it online. So they don't even have to come in person. And so that's how they're doing it here. They're creating these false voters that way, and then multiple other ways. So identifying all the ways that they can cheat besides the ones that I listed, I'm sure you've got like 20 more.
Yeah. Well, the first step is to get those false registrations, get those registrations inflated. And there's all kinds of ways to do that. And you just said how you feel they're doing it in Canada, which is not my field of expertise, but it makes sense. One way or the other,
We've
inflating the voter
confirmed that
list.
twice now from within the government. From whistleblowers within the government has said twice now that this is
I believe you. That's step one.
Yeah.
So the other thing is that I want to make clear to people is people say, well, we vote on paper. I vote on paper in New York State. I believe you do too, Michigan.
Yes.
Or Michigan.
Yes.
So, yep, we vote on paper, but here's the problem. We take our paper and we stick it in an electronic tabulator. That's
Yeah.
the problem. So the paper makes you feel good. You think you voted, but you know what? The machine voted. All right.
Yeah.
The machine has so many ways that we don't have time to get into right now, and we could come back, but there are many, many ways that those machines can alter the vote.
Right.
And that's exactly what's happening. So
And didn't you say earlier about a QR code to us offline?
Yeah, technically, the machine basically can either flip votes, like make it for the opposite candidate, or it can do a weighted vote. So let's say you give 3/4 of the vote to your candidate that you want to win, and 1/4 of it to the person who actually got the vote.
Right.
So these are the
what reason?
ways that the machines can cheat. And hold on, Randy, just one more thing.
Yeah.
So in theory, what they do is they have the machines, like, I think I've told you guys this before, how they have the set point, just like a thermostat. They have a set point that where they want the number to end up. And then when people start voting, they preload it with votes for their candidate. And then as people vote during the day, if it starts to go too high for the candidate that they don't want, they will inject votes. And that's where you see these lines that go in the machines that are straight up and down almost, which doesn't happen in a normal population, right? And sometimes the votes for that person go backwards, which doesn't happen in an election either, but it's happened in our elections. So, but they have this set point they want it to finish at, right? And then they take the mail-in ballots and they basically backfill.
Right.
So they need, those to backfill. However, in America, which we were just telling you with that one, with the prevalence study, clearly we've gone beyond that point because we have 29 million apparently ineligible registrations, which some of them, there's clearly no person to match that vote to. So
Right.
we've gone even beyond having to,
Mm.
account for those ballots that were plugged into, or those votes that were plugged into the machine. So
Hmm.
we have votes that cannot be matched to a person or a ballot, period.
And another little game that they played, two more little games that they played. One is they can adjust the focus of the reader, like adjusting your glasses or binoculars, and it's blurry and you can't see, so it can't read the ballot properly. And that's
Right.
another one of the things, which I don't have the numbers all memorized, but let's just put it this way. You're allowed a very, very small number of those ballots to be not read properly. And when they're not read properly, they're kicked out to what they call adjudication. And then they go in the back room, and somebody in the back room looks at the ballot and says, well, I think John Doe wanted to vote for Biden. And so you're allowed a very, very small, it's less than 2/3 of 1% of ballots that go to adjudication for any reason.
Right.
Well, they had several incidences where the number was huge. I'm not going to quote the number because I don't have it down good enough to quote it, but it was huge, way, way beyond the parameters of the law, where the votes are going to adjudication and they go in the back room and they're like, well, I think Biden. So there's another trick.
The wrong size paper.
Yeah,
The machines.
Know
So
that.
the vote, where it lined up, it would vote for the wrong person because they did the wrong size paper in the printer. They bring pre-printed ballots from the printing companies, and so they don't have to ever be mailed or anything, and there's no
Right.
creases in them. They've done things like they design the ballot so when it's folded to put in the envelope, it's right on a mark where the ballot or where the person is supposed to mark, so it misreads it
Right.
for the other person. They've really thought this through a lot.
I want to touch on the Arthur case a minute too, but another one is there's all kinds of ballots that were mail-in ballots. Well, in order to put that ballot in an envelope, you have to fold that ballot. Why do we have thousands upon thousands of ballots mailed in that have no creases or folds?
Yeah, that's what I was just saying. They just print them. They're not folded.
So, I mean, it's not just the machines. The machines are the basic tool that kind of gets the ball rolling and implements the cheating. But the mail-in stuff is huge because that's how the machines are adjusting the numbers. Like she said, they have a goal. It's like setting a thermostat on your furnace, and the machines do what the machines do. But
Right.
then it doesn't match up, of course. And so then they go back in, like in California, counting ballots a month later. Well, they're not counting ballots. They're writing ballots. They're back.
Right.
And we have caught them. Our audit team has people that will order up the voter registration rolls every week or two because they're always changing.
Right.
We have caught them still to this day, just a couple of months ago or less than 2 months ago, we caught them changing the numbers and changing the records in the 2020 election still to this day because
they're even changing. Tim has found in Michigan, they even changed the precinct where these people where people voted from. They change addresses, like things that are just seemingly like, why would you change that?
Wow.
Yeah,
Well-
and you're not supposed to change a voting record after the fact ever.
Yeah.
And he's finding that they're changing all kinds of things.
And I'd like to talk a little bit about the canvassing that Kimberly and I did. It's actually one of my favorite subjects. And this is something where this is so undeniable because we knocked on the doors and we talked to people and we had the evidence in our hands. We had people sign affidavits. It's absolutely undeniable. But just to go through a few really quick, I had one voter, a younger person, she was 21, 2, whatever, still living with her folks. They moved. Kimberly helped me find the real estate records of where they moved and where they moved to and when and whatever, because we already had, they'd come up on our radar screen. She had double votes, double registrations and whatever. And Kimberly really did the homework and really checked this stuff out, verified everything. So I go knock on the door and there's the person. Did you vote in the election of 2020? I'm going back to that again, but this is ongoing right up through current times. But just this one case was so blatant So she said, no, I didn't vote because I went to vote that day and they told me I couldn't. I didn't re-register when I moved. I moved on whatever date and it checked out what Kimberly had said and found it all checked out. I knew she was telling the truth.
Right.
And so she said, no, I didn't vote at all. I said, well, then I don't understand what happened here. And I said, I'm not accusing you. I try to tell people and put them at ease right away. Something's wrong and we don't think it's you, but we want you to be aware. We're not accusing you. You didn't do anything wrong because we're seeing this all over the place. We just are trying to verify things. So I said, you have it down that you voted twice on November 3rd, 2020. She said, I did not. I voted. I didn't vote. I got turned away. And so her little brother, this is just one story of the depth of the homework that we did. Her little brother standing on the porch called their parents and said, some guy's on the porch asking her about voting. And the mom says, put him on the phone. And I thought she was going to be mad or something. So I get on the phone. She says, can you wait there, please? I'll be there in 5 minutes. I said, yep. So she came and this is like when in the criminal investigation, they put two people that are suspects in separate rooms and then see if the stories match.
Right.
Sort of happened voluntarily. The mom comes home and she told me the exact same story that the daughter told me. So it's checking out the real estate records and the move times and all that Kimberly looked up, all checked out. I knew she was telling the truth. So, we got her to sign an affidavit. She did not vote. And then we get looking in the records and she registered on November 23rd, which is 20 days after the election. She registered twice and voted twice. And I have an affidavit from her that said she did neither.
Wow.
And in that same town, it's a very small town with a population like 150. I had 30 some people in that town who said they did not vote on November 3rd, 2020, but they had a vote shown and they were registered on November 23rd, all of them. One of them was a 16-year-old girl. And this was a year or two after the election, and she had 2 votes cast and registered on November 23rd. That's in one little town.
Wow.
I talked to people who said they voted and their vote didn't show. I talked to people. I had one guy who said he's never been in a voting booth in his life. I said, well, when's the last time you registered? He said, I registered once when I was 18. He was living at home. His folks was badgering him. You need to do this. You got to do this. And so he registered to vote, but never voted. He said he wasn't interested, didn't care about it. He said, I'm ashamed to say I'm 42, 3, whatever years old, and I've never voted. I said, well, that's odd because I have it down that you registered in October of 2020 and you voted on November 3rd. He said, no, I didn't. He said, I've never been in a voting booth in my life. I said, well, I have a cast vote here for you. So he signed an affidavit.
Right.
Wow.
We had another.
Is that us?
No.
Randy froze.
It's Randy froze.
Oh, okay.
Well, in the meantime, we did talk about in the lead up. Oh, we may just lose him for a minute. Are you back? Are you back?
You froze on us.
Yeah.
Now you started saying you wanted to let us know about the Arthur case.
Oh yeah, the Arthur case.
Well, Mr. M, Randy.
Mr. M, yes, Mr. M. This was a whole different line of thinking. And the point of what I'm going to make in this in the end is that, when we point out to election officials, you've got all these false registrations and all these problems. And they're like, well, yeah, that's not right. But it was a clerical error. So you had 1.4 million clerical errors. Your finger must be very tired. But that's their claim. Well, it was, we didn't get it cleaned up yet. It's a little mistake. And okay. So now we go to the Mr. M thing, which was not a little mistake. All right. So I get this record of this guy's got 25 or 24 or 5, whatever, voter registrations in New York State. Well, that's a bit of a problem. You're only allowed 1.
Right.
Really gets looking into this guy. He was never a resident of New York State. He was in jail in South Dakota when the registrations were created.
Which I believe your research person found all that, right?
Yes, our research person found all that. She did. Well, like I said, she's that end. That ain't me. That's all her. But
well, let me throw something in here real quick. So many, like I've seen God's hand in so many things since we've been working on election stuff. And I had just met Randy, and we just happened to be on the phone one night, and he was out canvassing in an ice storm, right?
Yep.
And
5
he's
hours
telling
from
me-
home.
Yeah, and he's like, I can't find this address or something. And it just so happens that I have software that I can look up property records, pulls the records right from the county. And he was having trouble with the address. Well, I said, well, let me look it up in my software. Okay. So that was the start of, we exploded the Mr. M case like crazy. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, I wanted to go home that night, but she kept sending me back. It was 8 o'clock.
I
at
was
night.
fine. I was still walking on,
I was 5
walking on
hours from home, and she kept sending me back.
and I was walking. I was warm walking on my treadmill at home.
So anyway, this case comes up, and I got this guy with all these registrations. She tips me off and says, well, this guy was never a resident of New York State, so, we smell a skunk. So the first address where he's supposed to live is like 8 or 9 miles from my house. So that's where I start. I go over there, knock on the door, looking for Mr. M. And the lady's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, well, there's supposed to be this guy. And, no, she says, I've lived here for since I was 10. She's like in her 70s. Sharp as a tack. Her grandson was there too. She says, there's no Mr. M. There never has been. So at that point, I didn't realize, because I'm used to going to a door and finding people who you find the person and you tell the person, well, you've got 2 voter registrations and we have a discussion. Well, I didn't find Mr. M there. So I was puzzled because our data people have been spot on 100% of the time. And I'm like, well, geez, somebody screwed up. So he's got another address, and I go to the next address over, and it's like a 40-mile drive. So I'm on a mission, I'm going. So I go over there to the next address, knock on the door. There's nobody home. I left a note on the door. I was there about election registration issues. Please call me. I hit the road. I'm going to the next address, which is another 40 or 50-mile drive. I get halfway there. The phone rings. I pick it up, and the guy says, what can I do for you? Whatever. I told him we had a guy there by Mr. M that we're looking for. We have a question on his registration. He says, there's no such person lived here. He said, this is the parsonage for the United Methodist Church in Mayville, and I have the records. This house was built in 1953, and I have the records of every minister who ever lived here, and there has never been any Mr. M here. So that's 2 for 2, and I'm starting to scratch my head. This is different. What's going on with this? So I go to the next address, and I get there, and I knock on the door, and same story. There's no Mr. M here. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I'm starting to see a pattern. Right? So, I asked him, has he ever lived here or whatever? And they were like, no, we built the house in 1982 and we're the only ones that have ever lived here. There is no Mr. M. So, and in the meantime, she's researching this stuff. And I'm like, okay, this is a whole different breed of chicken we got right here. So first of all, these registrations were made over a very short period of time, like a couple days. And they were, according to the record, not done online. They were all done in person at the Board of Elections in each county in question. Now, unless he drove a truck that's a hell of a lot faster than mine, he didn't make that journey and make 25 registrations scattered to every corner in New York State in 2 days. Because I tried it and it didn't work. And I got a pretty fast truck. What's that?
You were in an ice storm, though.
Yeah, that slowed me down a little bit.
That's what Mr. M went to prison for.
But
Identity theft.
Identity theft.
But he
you
didn't,
know the addresses.
he didn't make any of these registrations though. Somebody else did. It's just ironic that he was.
Well, I think it's more than ironic. I think that whoever did this was thinking ahead, thinking, well, if this ever truth comes out about this, he's in jail for identity theft, which is exactly what that is identity theft. We can just throw him under the bus, say, well, he's in jail for identity theft, so he did identity theft.
What's really crazy about all of that, and I still to this day can't figure out why somebody went to so much work, because this is one person out of many that we found anomalies with and false registrations, and they put a lot of thought and a lot of work into it. And this guy had 25 registrations, and even if he voted that many times, it's like all that work for 25 votes.
Well,
Right.
let me interject with that just a little bit, and I got to tread lightly on this because I don't like to say things that I can't absolutely prove. But what we think happened there, talking to our data guy, they have a forged document with his name on it asking for absentee ballots, and that was back at that time. That was a while back. He was getting absentee ballots, and they feel like he got many absentee ballots on each registration.
I have to say it again, though. It was not him. It was somebody using his name.
Correct. And the
Right.
other kicker is
He was dead by this time.
Kimberly found Mr. M living in a gas pipe in Ballston Spa, New York. We tracked that down to a trailer park, and she figured out by looking at the maps and addresses and all that they've got all these. We see patterns, all the trailers in the park. Go ahead.
Let me tell you how that one, because that's the one that sticks in my head the most out of all of them. Besides zooming in on Google Maps and seeing road names literally change.
Yeah, that was
Somebody
another one.
zoomed in and used that road name and then zoomed back out, and the road name was the other name. So crazy stuff.
Yep.
But this one particular registration, I'm looking it up, and on my software, you have to type the name in exactly how it is in the county records, or it won't pop up in my software. So sometimes you have to try like Parkway, you might spell it out, or PKY, or just stuff like that. So I put in the address, and it gives you a drop down if there's a couple of things that are close. And I get this big drop down, like 8 or 10 or 15 addresses. And I'm like, what the heck? And I looked at them, and they all had lot numbers next to them, but they were all the same address with the lot number. And I looked at the very last one, and it didn't have a lot number. I said, well, okay, let me look at this one. So I looked it up, or I clicked on it, and it was registered to a utility company. And so I called the utility company, and I said, do you own this property? And they said, yeah, that's our gas meter.
So Mr. M lived in a gas meter. He lived on a lily pad in Lake George. He lived in an empty ballet studio. He lived in a abandoned office building. He lived in so many places.
Wow.
So, and we did the homework. We went and researched it. We took pictures. We verified it. Here's another one that's undeniable, which is not the Mr. M case. But let me go back to Mr. M for a minute. The point I wanted to make about that is they always go on about, oh, it's a clerical error. So we made 1.4 million mistakes. So shoot me. That's their attitude, This wasn't a mistake because they always say they made these clerical errors. Well, we didn't have enough staff to keep up with it, and we're getting there. We're doing the best we can. We're sorry, and all that. This took time.
Yeah.
Somebody had to sit down and plot and plan and figure because they were finding
Somebody with a very devious mind.
Somebody did a lot of thinking to put that thing together.
Yes.
That took
Maybe
time.
AI.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't
AI
think
with all the algorithms now.
Oh no, this is too old for AI.
Yeah, this goes back far enough so it wouldn't have been.
Yeah.
Somebody somewhere sat down and spent a lot of time figuring this thing out.
And they would take the property if there was any sort of anomaly. Like, I'll just touch on this real quick, Randy. I won't give the whole story, but there was one road that was like a L shape, and there was a road that a driveway that went off it, and I don't remember all the details, but they took the confusion there because they ended up changing the addresses between that house and the house at the end of the road.
Well, what happened?
Hold on one sec. I'll let you finish.
Go
But
ahead.
so my whole point is we found anomalies, and so when anomalies like this came up, they took that and they created they used that confusion and that anomaly to create a registration. And it was all different circumstances and all different types of anomalies, but they found these anomalies and they used them.
Time and time again. Well, that took planning. That took time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a clerical error. That was somebody scratching their head and trying to figure that out and cover their tracks.
Right.
And that is looming large in an expected lawsuit in New York State, that whole thing, because that proves intent. That proves malice.
Right.
So
Well, I have to correct you, Randy.
I can't believe you would do that. Go
Let's
ahead.
remember what Marley always says when it comes to elections, at least in the United States. If there's an error such as those, if there are errors such as those, if there are things wrong like that, it doesn't have to be proven as malice. Just the
Right.
fact that it exists
Right.
means that it's not okay and there's a law that's been broken.
Right. So you guys know voter fraud exists. We know voter fraud exists. I mean, mostly because we've talked to you, but we've seen it here in Canada. So, before we go, we want to leave people on like a short list. And the last thing that we tell them is like, what do we need to do to restore voter integrity? Paper ballots, obviously, no mail-in ballots. They're trying to extend the mail-in or
voting day is 2 weeks long.
Right.
Yeah,
One
that's sort of
day.
advanced voting. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're trying to extend that now. So what are some of the better ways that we can ensure election integrity going forward?
That's one of the core laws. Like we talk about the laws that aren't being followed. And that's like one of the foundational laws here in the United States. Our elections and our Constitution says 1 day.
It
That
literally
shows you right
says that.
there how blatantly they're ignoring our laws.
Mhm.
Our Constitution says that.
Literally.
So go ahead, Randy. I'll let you say what you're gonna, talk about what people can do. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know what your abilities are in Canada to like FOIL records for registrations and like that, but you already think that you have something to work with as far as how they're inflating the registrations. But that's step one. The
Right.
registrations, inflating the registrations. How I don't know what you can do to get your hands on the records. I don't know what your laws are, but that would be a very important thing to do if you can.
Mhm.
Okay.
The next thing is get rid of voting season. It's supposed to be 1 day in the United States. I don't know what your laws are, but it's
Supposed to be 1 day.
Yeah.
It's in our Constitution.
Mhm.
1 day. It says it literally.
Mhm.
So make people abide by the law is one of the biggest issues. Our elections would be fine if people followed the law.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They don't. So get rid of voting season, the mail-in ballots, get it back, at least in our country. I don't know how it is in Canada, but it used to be you could get an absentee ballot. If you're a military person overseas or you're out of town for some legitimate reason, whatever, if you have a legitimate reason, then you can have an absentee ballot, and that's fine.
Mhm.
Right.
No problem with that. But that's this minuscule little amount of the vote. It's not
Right.
going to throw an election.
Mhm.
But to just open the floodgates and just give everybody a ballot and everybody can just mail it in and all that.
Right.
And then, like I told you about in Bucks County, well, it's past the day when we're supposed to be counting ballots, but we're just going to count them anyway. That stuff's got people have to follow the law.
Right.
Right.
And it's not lawful for them to throw out all these ballots. That was never put through our legislatures and put into law. They just did it.
Right.
Mhm.
We need to stop it. We need to make people follow the law.
Right.
So find out how they're blowing up the voter registrations. That is the foundation of the cheating. And
Right.
then the tool of the cheating, there's so many ways, and we don't have time to cover them all, but there's so many ways to cheat that probably the biggest number that's really going to affect an election is the electronic equipment with the tabulators and the pad polls that they sign in and all that. In other words, the electronic stuff needs to go.
Right.
It would be so much harder for them to throw an election if they had paper ballots. And I'm not going to say there's never been an incident of a little funny business with paper ballots, but it'd be very, very hard to throw a national election or a provincial election with paper ballots.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes the cheating exponential. And I don't know what you guys' laws are there as far as that sort of thing, but one way that can be approached is by the people who spend the money on the machines and have control of the money.
Mhm.
So we've talked a lot about when these people sign these contracts with these companies, these machine companies. Number one, they're signing contracts that are not allowing people to look into those machines. And
Mhm.
Dominion has sued everybody and their brother because they wanted to look at the software. So that's illegal here. They're supposed to be able to be auditable, the machines, and that's one way that can be approached, or it can be approached to get rid of the machines. And
Mhm.
also just it's what I've said this a million times, Randy. I think it's like 1/8 the cost, right?
Yeah,
To do paper
correct.
ballots versus machines.
Yep.
They spend millions on these machines, and it's not justified. And
Right.
anybody who says that you can't I mean, you guys do that you do paper ballots and hand counting. So you have a leg up on us for that one, because you know that it can be done in a day.
Yeah, you already know how to do it. We're relearning. We used to do it.
Well,
but
people
we're
say here that
relearning.
you can't do it in a day, but you can.
Yes, you can.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And we've gone
100%
to-
It always could before, up until
Yeah.
a certain year. We've
Exactly.
always done it that way.
And
And it's always
ID,
worked in a day.
yeah, I think ID is really important. In person, show
Yes.
your ID.
Yes,
You have to show your
Absolutely.
ID to go into a bar or to buy alcohol in
Right.
Walmart.
Yeah.
You can show ID to vote. There is no
Right.
privacy issue there.
And
So Marley just went through a study or an article the other day in our study session this week, and do you remember the organization, Randy?
no, I
Remember
don't.
she went. Anyway, so these people, the title of the article was basically clickbait, and it made it sound like they were disenfranchising. I don't know if it said they were disenfranchising Black people, because if they made them have voter ID, but once you read into the article and knew the facts, it actually showed that Blacks were more likely to, like they were saying, oh, they don't have access to their documents to show in order to be able to vote, because the Blacks were actually more likely to put their things like passports and stuff in a protective, like a what was she? I forget what she said. Did she say like safety deposit box or something, Randy?
Yeah, someplace secured. So
Yeah, so they couldn't go snap it up in a heartbeat. So it turns out, guess what? It wasn't them that you were disenfranchising. You weren't really disenfranchising anyone by requiring voter ID and paperwork.
Mhm.
But the clickbait title of the article made it sound like they were. So
the whole premise that minorities are whatever, they don't come out and say it, but the insinuation is that they're in some way incompetent or in some way not able to get voter identification or a personal ID or a driver's license. I think they drive. I think it's a slap in the face to minorities.
and they're insulted by it.
They should be. It is an
Yeah.
insult to say that
Absolutely.
they're, whatever word you want to put on it, incompetent or whatever word you want to use, whatever that insinuation is, it
Right.
is an insult to minorities
Of course.
to say
Agreed.
that they're not capable of getting
Yeah.
identification. That's an
Right.
insult. That's racist. You want to always carry on about racist? That's racist.
Yeah.
That's an insult to minorities.
Yeah.
So
Using
to
it as an excuse. Yeah.
Yeah.
To get back to your question, I would say people need to educate themselves.
Yes, they
I
do.
mean,
Yeah.
learn what the laws are, learn what parameters are supposed to be followed and whether they're being followed or not, and speak up. I mean,
What do you
we're all
have-
guilty of it, right? I
Yeah.
didn't know squat about elections, and I did not pay attention to politics until, maybe a little
But you
bit.
had to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there is a saying that you can ignore politics as long as you want, but sooner or later, politics isn't going to ignore you. And that's kind of where we
You
got.
got
I
it.
mean, I
good-
voted and stuff like that, but I just didn't get involved.
Yeah.
I
Well-
voted, but I didn't vote at primaries even. Now I even know how important primaries are.
Yep.
I thought, oh, well, the primary doesn't matter, but it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. Was it
Do you
Voltaire?
have-
Voltaire said the consequence of not getting involved in politics is that you have to be ruled by somebody lesser than you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very true.
Mhm.
Do you have the ability to have poll watchers that can go in on election day at the precincts and watch the voting going on?
Yes.
Is that allowed?
Yes.
Scrutineers.
That's
Yeah,
important.
we're going to start suggesting that we get people like bikers and other disagreeable people.
I can't be everywhere. My God.
Yes. Just let Jody
Be
hear one.
disagreeable. That's fine with me. Yeah.
I have a
And
question
therefore-
for you guys.
Therefore, my premise that Jody started it, going back to the Ottawa truckers and all of this wave making that we've been doing.
I have a question for you guys.
What's that?
How is it that your elections, like they can just randomly call for an election when, like, how is that possible? How does that?
Europe.
They do it all the time.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
just
Europe does
And
that.
so
Yeah.
is that the way the law is set up, or are
They can do it instead of typically what they should be doing whenever there's a question that should be brought or answered by the people. They should be holding referendums, but that's too costly and too much work. So instead they'll call an election early. And if they're whichever party's in charge at that moment in time, if their popularity rating is really high and they've got another year or whatever on their term, but they know they're going to be bringing in something that might not be so popular when the actual election is scheduled, then they'll call it while their popularity is still high. They win 4
That's
more years.
crazy.
Then they do the crap that wouldn't allow them to win an election next time around. We know CBDCs are on the rise. We know digital ID is on the rise. Who knows what else is coming down the pipe? Well, we've got our ideas, but we know that digital ID and CBDCs are supposed to roll out. So Doug Ford, in all of his glory, he's looking at calling an election, or it's rumored that he's going to call election within the next week or two, probably for the end of February, because right now his popularity is still high. The Liberal popularity is excruciating low in the garbage can, mostly because of Trudeau. So now's the perfect time. Instead of waiting a year from now, call it now. Well, people are liking the Conservatives over the Liberals. That will buy him 4 more years to implement his digital ID. By the time 4 years rolls around, people will have forgotten that he was the one that brought in digital ID, and he can run for election again.
Yeah,
Wow.
pretty shifty way of going about it.
Very
Right.
shifty.
Another thing, learn the chain of custody rules with the ballots and the voting and all that, and put people watching that. And one thing I would caution you about is the thumb drives that come out of these tabulators. They take those out and they turn those in, and the chain of custody on that's not so good. I mean, those thumb drives can be switched, they can be altered.
Mhm.
Who's watching the thumb drives? They give it to somebody to take into the from the precinct, and they take it into the county canvassing center. I mean, most people are probably not dishonest enough to do something like that, but that possibility exists. So,
Someone's paid to do it.
Mhm.
Just like
Chain of
someone was
custody.
paid to stuff the mail-in ballot boxes, right? So
there's so many ways they get away with this crap. Do you know that there are cords that look like they're an iPhone charging cord, and people can plug that into the computers at the voting machine or the voting precinct,
Mhm.
and look like they're charging their phone, and they can actually download to that machine and
Yep.
program it so
Wow.
it can flip votes.
It goes on and on and on. So we have to be
Yes.
super aware. I mean, it's funny because we've been at this 2 hours now, and it's scratching the surface.
yeah.
We've had multiple conversations like this over coffee, and it's gone on 45 minutes is a blink of the eye when we're talking about this stuff. It just goes on and on and on. But we've had you on the show a couple times before. We felt like this was a really good time to have you back on, just because the election's been so looming in Canada. So
thank you so much for educating our viewers on what to look out for, what is super important going into the next elections, and hopefully how we can change the rules, or at least engage with the rules for our next election. This was really super helpful. And I'm glad you guys got the president that you were looking for.
Always.
and
Right.
well, it remains to be seen what he's going to do and if he's going to keep the hope alive, hopium.
Yeah, or crush
with-
your souls into oblivion.
Exactly. But either
No
way,
in between.
we don't want to be the 51st state. We're happy being your united neighbor and fighting the good fight together.
That's
So-
I'll give you a heads up if we see an invasion coming through. All right.
Thank you.
So I get, like, I can so relate to that because there would be maybe good things that came with that, but yet you guys are your own personality, right?
Yes.
You have your own
Exactly.
flavor. You're your own personality. I just want to say to people who are, involved with this stuff. Well, first of all, if you're not involved, get involved, but don't give up hope. I mean, look what we did, and we still are so far from this job being done, but look what we accomplished, and look what God did. And we've seen his hand so many times in all of this. And people are seeing now, like the left, they pretty much know now that they're on the downside of things.
Yeah.
And like I said, the attitude and the atmosphere at Davos was down. So there's a lot of things happening. The tide has shifted. But we got to keep working. It's definitely shifted, but we haven't won the war yet. We won some battles, not the war.
right.
So don't give up.
I explain it this way in pretty simple terms: is the United States and the free world got a stay of execution on November 5th, 2024. And we won a great battle. We won a great victory. And a lot of that victory was due to the fact that it was too big to rig. And a lot of it was the immense pressure that not just our group, but groups all over the United States were scrutinizing the election. And there was such a microscope on it. They did try to cheat, and they just could not put it together. And being too big to rig was a lot of that. But so was the pressure. And so
Yeah.
put the pressure on. Get involved. Let them know that you're watching. Educate yourselves, and get involved. Don't give up hope. And I got to say, I'm a pretty stubborn guy, and so was Kimberly. But there's times when you just think you're banging. Did I say that? There's times when we feel like we're just banging our head on a brick wall, and you get discouraged, and you just the next day you dust yourself off and you put one foot in front of the other and you hit it again. You can't stop. And one thing that I would like to suggest is joining. I would love to have Canadians join us in the fight against the Dominion machines. I mentioned I got a federal lawsuit that's where it's leading to, is getting rid of the machines, and we're working with Professor Clements, and we're going to be working on that. We would love to have Canadians join us. I'd love to have everybody in the world that's ever seen a Dominion machine.
It's not only Dominion, it's all of them.
We have
Yes,
to get rid of them.
it's all of them, not just Dominion. They're
Exactly.
all
One other suggestion. You probably can early vote and mail-in vote and all that. Well, just because you can, don't.
Exactly.
Do not. Yeah.
Do not do it. That's one of the biggest tools they have. They can't do the cheating without all the ingredients. They have to have the inflated registration rolls. They have to have the electronic machines, and they have to have the mail-in ballots that they can backfill and do all their dirty work. Take the legs out from under the stool.
Right.
That's something that you have the power to do. You can say, I'm not voting early.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Right.
You can, but don't. Because
Agreed.
Right.
they use that to backfill, and they also are looking at those votes, and they're getting a pretty good guess about who voted and how that vote is, the tendency of that vote. And then they're sitting there calculating, well, we're going to have to cheat by 21% or whatever. They're using that information against you. Do not early vote just because.
honestly, you shouldn't even take your cell phone with you either, because they use that data too to know who's
Right.
voted.
Yeah.
Who hasn't.
Yep.
Oh, thank you
So
so
much.
much, guys, for
Yeah.
coming out and spending this time with us and educating our viewers, because I think we're going to need it in the very, very near future.
I want to say one more thing for sure. There's so much information, like we were saying, there's so much to this. David Clements' movie it spells it out so well. And on his social media, you can get clips of the movie too. But I would recommend that everyone watch his movie called It's Let My People Go. .movie it's free.
Okay.
It's on Rumble. You can get it free. Watch the movie. It puts all the pieces together and explains. I watched it 5 times literally, and I learned something every time. And it shows how everything works together and breaks it down by section to show you how all the pieces and parts work. And then he brings it all together and shows you how they put it all together to cheat and steal our elections. So a really good way to understand things.
Okay. Let my people go .movie.
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Good. He put the link up. Good. And when you go on Rumble, it looks like you have to pay, but you don't. Like you just click through and then you can get the movie. So you do not have to pay for it.
Okay.
No matter what, you don't.
Okay. We'll try to put that description or a link in the description on Rumble as well.
Perfect.
Yeah. Send people over there. Guys, thanks again. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise and all that you've been doing to prove that this was a real thing. And I think you're instrumental in the fact that they couldn't do it again this year. So thank you for everything you did.
Your
Thank
hard
you
work
for
paid
everything
off.
you're doing.
Yes. Amen.
Well,
Yeah.
Thanks, you guys.
thanks for
Love you guys.
giving us the time. We love to share the news.
Sounds good.
You too. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Yeah.